You're listening to The Sizzle on Iron Skillet Radio and Iron Skillet Television.
You know what it is. You know who it is. It's The Sizzle here in the building. You know what we're getting ready to do. We're getting ready to talk about fantasy football, and we've talked about it before, but now we're going to get into the specifics. We're going to get into the meat of it, the heart of the plate, right here on The Sizzle. But before we do that, remember, if you have not liked, subscribed, and shared, make sure to hit that button, hit that notification, get all of the content that's coming. You can do it. Just push the button, and you can do it just like this. Now you have all of the information that you need to be able to win your fantasy. So we've talked about it before, gentlemen. Let's talk about it now. Let's go through 2021, 2022. What is going on with fantasy football at the QB position? Now, this is the spot where we want those people who are coming into fantasy to be able to understand how to pick the best quarterback and how to maximize your quarterback pick, even if you have a quarterback that you pick later in the draft. So, okay, Rich, we'll start it out with you. When it comes to quarterbacks, let's go through the top end of quarterbacks, the top echelon. What's your theory right now on how you pick a quarterback coming into fantasy?
Let me break this down because most people are not going to pick a quarterback as their first pick. It just doesn't happen like that. However, I feel like it's just like playing chess. The king may be the most important piece. You don't move the king first, but still the most important piece. And that's how I look at the quarterback. If you don't have a quarterback in your lineup that is going about 250, 3 touchdowns a game and not throwing interceptions everywhere, you're in big trouble, because that's, regardless of whatever you're going to call it, the quarterback's probably going to score the most points on your team. The difference is this year from last year is there are actually a decent amount of first-tier quarterbacks. When I mean by first-tier, I mean like those are players that you're pretty sure are going to score high volume of points. However, after that first tier, they drop down quickly. And that's what I'm afraid of. We can go about 6 different names. And actually, if you're looking for some research, go to CBS Sports Fantasy. They actually break down how their tiers look. I actually agree with their first tier. They've got Mahomes, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, and Russell Wilson. I might have put in.
Let's hold on a second there, Rich. Let's hold on a second there, Rich. We have a Dak Prescott who's coming off an injury. Okay. We have a Josh Allen who's going to do well on his feet this year. We got still what he's going to do in the arm.
Right.
And we got to look now that we look on the other side, you got Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers not in that first tier. And
we have to
look. We have to look. Aaron Rodgers, MVP Aaron Rodgers, is not in your first tier. And this is a man who's coming back with something to prove, right? We know he's going to prove. Oh, he's coming. Look, here's the issue with him. They know that Packers ball club up there is good enough to contend to win the championship with Aaron Rodgers.
They also good enough to contend. They also know Aaron Rodgers is out of there by February at the latest.
Absolutely. So is this not a guy who's going to throw for big yardage? And we know a lot of times with these heads-up quarterbacks, well, look at Tom Brady. Is this a guy who's going to throw for big yardage in his offense? Could he go over 5,000 yards this year? Real possibility.
No.
You don't think he can go over 5,000?
No.
Oh, no. You don't think so?
That's why he's in the second tier. Tom Brady's a journeyman now. He's going to do just enough to win them games. He ain't about to be sitting there overexerting himself, trying to do a whole 16 or 17-0 like he did those last.
I think he's going to have to put points up.
He ain't doing all that.
He's going to have to put points up. He's going to have to put points up.
Have you seen his division?
He's going to still have to put points up.
His division is weak sauce.
He's going to have to put points up. Tom Brady's still going to air it out.
Really?
Tom Brady's still, but he's going to air it out though. He's going to air it out.
He doesn't matter. His his conference is the weakest conference I've ever seen by far. Don't even act like he has competition in that conference. He don't have to show up half the time.
So we're looking at a Tom Brady going for 4,000 yards, 4,100 this year.
Not fantasy relevant as far as I'm going to pick Tom Brady in my first, second, or third round. Absolutely not.
Well, okay, then so when you're looking at Kyler Murray, who is looking at Russell, is Russell going to be able to produce like he's been producing this whole period of time? Because I think with Russell, you're looking on past performance right now.
Yeah, but
you know what
also
I'm
have
saying?
a better offensive line too.
You're just looking at past performance. Patrick Mahomes, we saw what did they figure out? Because a lot of people right now are going to watch fantasy. You know what I found out? A lot of people are going to do. You're going to have some people who are going to pick Patrick Mahomes in the first round.
Absolutely, and
they're going to do it. And you almost can't. And you almost can't argue with that. I mean, he was that guy. So it's really fantasy. Well, he was that guy. We're going to see. It's hard. It's hard to keep that level up. It's hard to stay up here at the top. You know, when people are swinging at you up there, and we saw what happened to him. We saw what happened to him when they started playing him a little different, and they took away Tyreek Hill from him. When he did not have that deep throw, and so all of a sudden he has to check down, he's a little bit different quarterback than what he was when he had to cheat out there just running past everybody at 4-2.
Next down to Travis Kelce. Oh my God, that's a huge downgrade.
Yeah, but your tight end's not going to beat you. All right, your tight end, you got to go up top. Your tight end's not going to beat you. You throw the tight end all night long.
I'll tell you what, I guarantee you that tight end will be drafted before a lot of your expected wide receivers.
Oh yeah, well you want to get the best value that you can at that position, and we know there's only 2 or 3 guys who have top value at that position because the wide receivers are deep. There's plenty of wide receivers out there. You can auto draft wide receivers. Auto draft wide receivers.
Wide receivers are not deep at all this year.
You can auto draft wide receivers.
You have 2 wide receivers that's worth talking about: Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill. After that, it's kind of like, nah.
Oh, so okay.
Okay, so Rich, let me ask this question. When it comes to the third tier and the fourth tier, so we're talking about Matthew Stafford and Joe Burrow, which I think Joe Burrow leaves a lot to be desired after injury, has not looked good throughout camp, hasn't looked good through preseason. We're still not really sure where he is. But when you get third tier and then fourth tier, there's a question here. In the fourth tier, they're all rookies. And only we know of one who's starting, and that's Trevor Lawrence, we think. But you got Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. So if those are my fourth tier in the 9th or the 11th to 12th round, are those good value picks to pick out of those 3 right there at that fourth tier?
As your bench? Sure. These are, you know what? I'm going to grab this guy. I'm going to stash him because, like you said, at worst, I picked up Tom Brady to be my starter. And I need somebody to play when Tom Brady's on a bye. Or I might need somebody to play when Tom Brady's in a tough matchup. Or maybe these guys have a favorable matchup. Trevor Lawrence, week 1, has a very favorable matchup with the Houston Texans. I would actually gamble on him going out there and doing halfway decent. He's not going to be somebody I would pick up in the 5th or 6th round. But absolutely, if you play the matchups like you're supposed to, yeah. And to go back a little bit, I really think Matthew Stafford is going to have a lot better year than just third tier where he's at. I think he's actually going to have second tier performance. He might actually be one of the top 10 quarterbacks this year. If you look at, that's a decent offensive line. He's got a lot better people to throw to now, and he has something to prove. So I really think they're undervaluing him right now.
Okay. So his undervalued nature, Jay, if you're looking at those 2 tiers, just the third and the fourth tier, before we even get into the 5th tier, is there one, just as Rich said, he thinks Matt Stafford, if we're talking about tiers, is there somebody that you think maybe is miscast in their tier at this point?
Well, not miscast in their tier, but I think he's going to be your game 3 or 4 guy who's going to come in and start ringing up numbers, and that's probably going to be Justin Fields. I just think because of he's going to have to be on the move, and this guy who's legitimately probably the fastest guy on the Chicago Bears, probably. He's got a big arm, and he's a guy who studies really well. I think he's a guy, after a while, Andy Dalton is probably going to blow up at some point in time. Age catches up to everybody, and I believe Justin Fields is going to get inserted because if the Bears get off to a slow start, if they come 1-3 out the hole, the fans are going to be screaming for Justin Fields. He's going to get on the field, and he's going to rack up yardage. This might be a guy that you want to pick up maybe sooner than later who's possibly going to be out there running you some big fantasy numbers.
All right, let's jump then into our 5th tier and the early streamers from what we have, rounds 13 and back, when you're talking about the back end of your players. And it's a real interesting list here. We've got Tua, Cousins, Matt Ryan, and Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger is one I'm interested in. For some reason, Rich, I think Ben Roethlisberger should probably be in the 4th tier. Am I correct to make that assumption? Should he be a 4th tier quarterback in the system?
We don't know what Ben Roethlisberger we're going to get. We definitely have an aged Ben Roethlisberger, but we do have a young receiving core. And he has always been good at getting the ball to people when he has time.
Yep.
Has that offensive line increased well enough for him to be protected? Mind you, we have an older Ben Roethlisberger. I don't think he hasn't lost anything in his arm, but he has probably lost something in his legs. But I do agree with you. The potential is there a lot higher than where it is. If we're talking about a 10-team league, I might pass him up. But in a 12-team league, you might want to look at him in a very late round. Absolutely. And the other person that I'm kind of wondering why he's not even really there is Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield has all his weapons come back, has a very well improved offensive line. See, in years past, I remember when he was like the 3rd ranked quarterback, what was that, 2 or 3 years ago? And it was just a complete dud because his offensive line was awful. They have increased tremendously. He has no excuses this year not to put up good numbers. If you can grab him last round or whatever, he's still available, you should not be disappointed, in my opinion. I mean, if you're, like I said, if you're waiting and no one's picked him up anyway, you get him in the last round, he doesn't do anything. He didn't lose anything anyway.
Interesting point. Jay, when we look at the early streamers, you look at Ryan Fitzpatrick, Sam Darnold, Cam Newton, and Taysom Hill. Cam Newton is the interesting jack here. He's the wild card here because it seems like Cam Newton right now is in a battle for that starting QB position. Do you think that picking up Cam Newton is a good play for your fantasy on the back end for your bench?
No, I don't think so. I just think we've seen the best of Cam. I just think we've seen him, and we've seen that Cam has been oft injured now. I mean, I just think Cam, what's really weird with Cam now is that it looks like Cam is really trying to lock in. I think he always took into for granted that he was going to be the starter because he was Cam Newton, and now he's a shell of himself. And it's not his fault mentally. It's just his fault because of his shoulder and his legs right now. So we're looking at a guy who's fighting for a starting position. I don't think he's going to get it or keep it. I just don't think so. I think he's going to be injured. I think if you pick him up, you're going to go put him in there. I think he's a long shot. I'd stay away from Cam Newton.
Okay. So is there a streamer, Rich, there in this bunch or this little mashup that you would say stay away from, not a good pickup for your team, even on the bench?
Yeah, Cam Newton.
Okay.
Since we were talking about him.
Okay.
Anybody in New Orleans that is totally reliant upon when Michael Thomas comes back, or if he comes back. I will tell you something. Like we were talking about, like Jay was saying about the wide receiver and depth. It's really not that deep anymore. Julio Jones, who was number one guy forever, being drafted 7th and 8th because we don't know what his health is going to be like.
Yeah.
Michael Thomas, we don't know when he's coming back. A guy of that talent, and then we already know Drew Brees ain't throwing to him.
Yeah,
it's going to be
no Larry Fitzgerald.
No, right. A lot of these guys, like where are they at now, and where are their health related to? They're not healthy. So New Orleans, they're out. Carolina, Sam Darnold, he's out. Was that guy in New York? The heir apparent now to Sam Darnold. I can't think of his name. I don't trust him.
It doesn't matter. He's a rookie. Nobody knows his name.
Right. Are you really gonna go out there and bet the farm on Ryan Fitzmagic?
Well, that's a good question. Let's put Fitzmagic on the table, gentlemen. What do you do with a Ryan Fitzpatrick? And as a starter, you know he's going to get starter minutes. He's going to have some kind of value, but
what value?
I don't know. What is Washington going to do with him?
Fitzpatrick is like Nick Foles. He'll have that one game where he'll light you up for like 800,000 points, and the rest of the season he'll give you zeros, goose eggs, and below freezing temperature is what he'll do. And it's hard to predict it. And I wouldn't put anybody through that kind of agony to sit there and say, this week is going to be the week that Ryan Fitzpatrick goes off for you. It's just not worth it.
But you know, the thing that's weird about that is that you have one of the best running backs in the league playing for Washington right now. That offense is going to be good. And this is almost a soup that's sort of cooked for Ryan Fitzpatrick to actually produce. Now, I know, and Rich knows, that by week 4, he's going to be sitting on the bench. But this is a guy who can fill it up for you because he does have weapons. Washington's a good football team. And so they got weapons around him. So they're going to be, you never know. Fitzpatrick is one of those guys you never know. The genie might pop out the bottle, and all of a sudden he's playing great for, half the season. Who knows?
Now that I got to disagree with you, though. I don't think Fitzpatrick, unless he gets hurt, gets replaced. There's nobody behind him. Nobody wants to talk about.
But Washington is a team that should be contending this year. You know what I'm saying? So, they should be contending. And so you wonder, is there going to be some movement somewhere? You know what I'm saying? Is something's going to happen? Because this is a team that can make, hey, Washington is a good football team. What is their name? Does anybody have a name? Do they have a name?
The football team.
Are they just going to keep that?
Listen, the Washington football team, I did my best. I wrote, I emailed, I sent pigeons and everything else. I wanted them to be called the Washington Sasquatches. I mean, do something. The unicorns. Do something fun and whatever. You can't never discriminate. If Sasquatch comes out there and discriminates about people making fun of Bigfoot, then at least you can debunk that myth and say, well, at least they finally exist. But
they should call themselves the Dragons or something like that. Like watch the Dragons.
They'll find a reason to say something bad about that. That's devil worshiping or something.
It's just
sensitive
bad
nowadays. I digress.
It's just bad.
You're absolutely right. That's another division that we don't know what Dallas team's going to come out of there.
They should call them the Washington. What's that? The LGBTQ community. They should just call them the LGBTQYZXs.
Washington alphabet. There you go.
All right, so let's talk about something. Since we want to talk about letters, let's talk about something a little taboo. As we look at the 5th tier and the 4th tier and the early streamers, there's one name that's absent on that list. And since we were just talking about a Washington team that I think should be called the Washington Generals, but if they are called the Washington Yetis, that's fine with me. Here's the question. At this point, what do you do about a Desean Watson who's no longer even in a tier that's not even talked about, but if he's free, might be able to play? If he's free.
Okay. Look, first things first, all right? If you ain't got a massage table out, he ain't coming. That's number one. Okay. Look, I'll leave that one alone. And then on the other side of it is that he and R. Kelly, hopefully they're going to be roommates because
man,
look,
y'all about to start cussing.
Look, let me tell you something. This is not going away. All right. It's just not going away. And if you have him on his football team, you got protests coming, all types of nonsense going to happen. Now, he showed up because he wants to get paid. That's what he wants to do. Smart move on his. I'm not missing out. Y'all going to pay me. But we all know that the league does have a morals clause in there, and they can't start voiding contracts at some point in time. If he gets convicted of anything, we're going to see what happens. But I don't know how you run him out there. You know what I'm saying?
He hasn't even showed up in pads yet. Like looking for the Yeti, man. It's like they have sightings of him, but that's it. There's like, oh, I think there he is, and then as soon as you see him, he's back off the field. So I know that's completely, what do you call it, undraftable.
We're missing out on somebody though.
Well, I mean, how many teams? Because he's gonna get traded, released, or whatever. So I mean, if he goes to a team without cheerleaders, you might be fine. I don't know. You know.
Wow. You know what? Hey, Rich, what do you think about this though? I'm just funning around with this in my head a little bit, but we know the gadget guy is possibly going to be starting down for the Saints and Taysom Hill, right? Fantasy wise,
I'm a famous Jameis.
Fantasy wise, though, let's take a look at Taysom Hill. If he actually got time to play out there, we know he is devastating down around the goal line. We know he can punch the ball in. I mean, he's another big fullback with wheels back there. Mm-hmm. And they have a tendency to run the pistol and give him the football, let him run the old wing T right or wing T left or whatever they got doing. There's a guy who could score a couple of touchdowns for you a ball game, 2 or 3 touchdowns, who could be running for 80 or 90 yards. That sounds like a running back. You know what I'm saying? Now, we know he needs to have quarterback numbers. He needs to be up in, but he'll get some passing yards. Is this a guy you look at as a second, as a QB number 2, fantasy late? I might give him a shot pick because maybe he might be generating big fantasy numbers for you.
Only if you have a deep bench. I would say if you have a bench that's set up where you can have 3 quarterbacks, one starter and then 2 on the bench, yes. I don't think he's going to be the starter week 1. I think Jameis Winston will start.
Crab leg man's going to start?
Yep. I think so.
Oh, crab legs?
Yeah. Famous Jameis. Mr. 30 for 30.
You know what's amazing about famous Jameis? He's still in the league, still slinging the football around. You know what I'm saying? He has not figured out how to get put out the league.
I mean, Desean Watson should have taken notes from him. I don't know.
Desean Watson should have called Magic City. That's what he should have did. And we wouldn't have these problems right now. And they have massage tables there.
So as the rundown, as we get ready to wrap on quarterbacks in your fantasy league and what your tiers should be, you're looking at, we're going using CBS Fantasy Football, first tiers through early streamers. So right now, let me just ask the question of both of you. We said it before, but we talked about Patrick Mahomes as one that can be taken in the first round, that many people in mock drafts have taken as a number 1.
They're going to do it.
There be a possibility where you could see 2 quarterbacks taken as a first tier in the first round in this upcoming draft. Rich, I'll start with you.
All right.
If I have the option to use my pick on a Josh Allen or one of Tampa Bay's receivers or even maybe an Allen Robinson, would I be better served picking Josh Allen over one of these receivers who may or may not give you good fantasy numbers?
Just depends on what receivers you already have. If you're talking about Allen Robinson over Josh Allen, I'd probably tell you to go with Josh Allen. I definitely would tell you to go with Josh Allen over the Tampa Bay receivers. I mean, there's just too much inconsistency. I really don't like playing that we have 2 good receivers and whichever one catches the hot hands, because if you go with Mike Evans will be hot for 8 games and then you flip the turn, and now Godwin's hot for the rest. And then you're sitting there struggling to figure out which week is what. Josh Allen should be a lot more consistent of a pick, in my opinion. And like we said, he is a tier 1 quarterback. He is not a Patrick Mahomes, but he is, if everything goes right in the fantasy world, which it never does, but you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. He will give you good, solid points that will be well above any second or third or fourth tier quarterback that's on that list.
Okay. So, Jay, the question to you. In the 3rd to 6th round in those picks, if you have the opportunity to get a Dak Prescott or a Russell Wilson, are you best served with getting one of those quarterbacks over a lower-tiered running back who may or may not be able to produce on a weekly basis?
Well, again, it's the same issue to just what Rich was just talking about. You don't know, especially with those running back situations, because guys get hot and they get cold. It all depends who they're playing against. But I think you look at a Russell Wilson who's been a noted producer for a long period of time, and I think fantasy has changed a lot just because now the league is offensive orientated and you can't touch the quarterbacks. And so now we've known that if you are in a fantasy matchup and your quarterback has a bad day, then your team is toast. So you got to put somebody in there that's going to put up numbers for you. You can't have a quarterback that's averaging 30 fantasy points, like he's going to get 30 points, and all of a sudden he gives you 15 because it's super hard to make up those points. You can make up a running back who was supposed to get 14 points for you, and all of a sudden he gets 8. You can make those points up. It's just hard to make up fantasy points by a quarterback. I would probably lean to the quarterback on that, and I think you're going to see a lot of leagues start to do that, because if you don't have good quarterback play in your fantasy league, you got a problem.
I agree, and then I kind of don't agree, because where you're going to run into a problem with is if you don't grab up 2 solid running backs somewhere between round 1 and round 3, you're in trouble, just to be honest with you. Well, if you're down there and you're relying on David Montgomery to be your bell cow running back as your RB1, you're in trouble. You can go ahead.
But the issue is this, though. If you go get a Saquon Barkley, like I did at one point in time, and he goes down early, then you're cooked. You know what I'm saying? If you get Ezekiel Elliott and he goes down early, because all your eggs are in that basket in those top-tier running backs. If one of those guys get injured, you got to be a really good fantasy trickster and start calling people on the back, talking about, look, I'll buy you a cheeseburger. Let's do this draft. Unless you're like some of our illustrious leaders of the leagues who nix drafts, who nix trades back and forth, because like, nope, you're not getting that guy, and he nix trades. It's going to be difficult. So I mean, it's really difficult. If your guys stay healthy, hey, it's great. But if you lose one of those guys, now you got a problem, and that's the fun part, and that's the hard part about fantasy.
That's the reality, because guess what? The same thing with Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. His backup is going to be available, but do you really put your trust in Mr. Trubisky now?
Now let me ask you a question. Now let me ask you a question though. Yeah. Say you got in a 10-team league, right? Let's say you've got one of the top 20 quarterbacks. Can we look and see that possibly that number 18th or 19th quarterback or 17th quarterback, if you don't have Josh Allen, could he possibly produce the same type of numbers that Josh Allen would produce for you, giving 3 or 4 or 5 points?
I would say this, though, because you said in a 10-team league, getting a good quarterback is so important. Yeah. In a 10-team league, you have more running backs to look at. You actually might have some bell cow running backs on the waiver wire come week 1.
Yeah.
Because there's that many of them. But like we said, quarterbacks, after you get past your 7 or 8 names that we've already rattled off, and you got 10 teams, so that 9th or 10th team is going to be in trouble. It's like, ooh, I got to be really on my game about matchups and things like that, or just a real good, guessing gambler.
Well, Well, that wraps up our quarterback segment of how you look at drafting and where you need to look at drafting a quarterback and what quarterbacks maybe will work best for your team, how you fit them in, and how they'll work so that you can win at your fantasy league. You know who's in the building. He's Jay Sizzle. He's Rich Sizzle. I'm G Sizzle, and we want to thank you for watching another episode of How to Beat Your Fantasy with the Fantasy Experts.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something else. My bad.
Well, that's now,
No more Watson jokes.
No. Oh my goodness. Oh, how to beat your quarterback. That's
how to beat
next.
your quarterback. Yeah.
On the Sizzle After Dark. We'll see you, my friend, on the other side.
Make sure that you follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Iron Skillet Sports. And remember to like, share, and subscribe to Iron Skillet Sports on YouTube at Iron Skillet Sports.